Ladies and gentlemen, 2017 was an incredible year for video games. We saw the release of the Nintendo Switch, we got tons of new games released across all the consoles and the PC, and unfortunately, I was not able to play too many of those. So what I wanted to do was just create a small list here. It's going to be my top 4 games that I played this year. Now, not all of these games technically released this year, but they had some sort of expansion or big content release for them that I really enjoyed in 2017. So this list is going to be very informal, just a very personal list of games that I played myself and truly enjoyed. So I hope you enjoy the video, and thank you so much for watching. So for the first game on my list that I want to talk about is The Elder Scrolls Online Morrowind. Now, I'm talking about specifically the expansion to Morrowind, but it's kind of one and the same with the actual game. Now, the original Elder Scrolls Online released in 2014, and now in 2017 we had the Morrowind expansion. And normally an expansion like this I wouldn't consider, but the expansion really did kind of, it reimagined Morrowind in a way. So if you're not familiar, Morrowind, the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, takes place in Vardenfell, which is home to the city of Vivec, Balmora, Seydanin, places like that. And what the Morrowind expansion did was they actually got the land file from Morrowind, and this is what I heard they did. They took the actual data from Morrowind, the land, and brought that into the Morrowind engine and expanded it to be a huge, massive area. And then they completely recreated the cities of Vivec. Well, sort of. In this expansion, because it takes place generations before Morrowind occurred, Vivec City you actually see being built, and that's just a really cool experience. But you can see the city of Balmora reimagined, and everything is just so much bigger, mostly because the engine allows it now. It's a little weird considering the game takes place before Morrowind, and then certain cities are bigger than they were in that game, but that was the limitation of technology back at the time. But because I'm currently playing Morrowind on the channel, the original Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, seeing this expansion was just so impressive. Being able to travel to these locations, being able to see silt striders and actually use them as transportation around, it was very surreal in a way. It was very cool. And then to add on to that, the expansion introduced a new class into the game, and it was a very fun class, maybe a little overpowered in certain ways, but overall what the expansion did was it pushed the game forward in a way that it really needed. And a lot of people will look at the Elder Scrolls Online from their experience when it first launched and think that it's not doing great, but actually, ever since the Morrowind expansion, the game, when you're in it, appears to be bigger than ever. Now, I'm not sure of the actual numbers of players, but the community and the developer feedback and everything going on that you would expect with an MMO, it's very strong. The game is doing, I think right now, better than it has been in a very long time. And I think a large part of that is because of the Morrowind expansion, which brought a lot of people back into the game, and those people who may not have previously enjoyed the Elder Scrolls Online were able to come in, see all of the changes that have been made over the years, and see just this new area and this huge devotion to bringing these Elder Scrolls fantasies to life. And that was just really impressive. And as someone who is, you know, as I mentioned, currently playing Morrowind, just very surreal. For my next game of 2017 that I absolutely enjoyed was Warframe's expansion Plains of Eidolon. Now I know maybe it's not great that 2 of my top 4 games are expansions, but I think that just speaks to how incredible these expansions are. It also kind of speaks to how few games I've actually been able to play in 2017, but that's a different conversation. Warframe Plains of Eidolon was mind-blowing. So, if you're not familiar with Warframe, it's a free-to-play game on Steam, and I don't think you can get it anywhere else. And basically, you're a space ninja. So you fly your ship from location to location within this kind of galaxy. You go into these different planets, go to the different missions with on those planets, and then, before the Plains of Eidolon, you would be sent into kind of a randomly generated, I don't know what you would call it, maze. So it kind of created almost like a Diablo dungeon type maze where you had doors that were locked off and paths that led you around, and there was secrets here and there, and you would pretty much fulfill the mission within that generated dungeon, and then you would head back out and you would get loot and upgrade your character, and it a little bit grindy, but the gameplay of it was so solid, I never minded. But then here comes the Plains of Eidolon, and it introduces into a game that very much could have been described as claustrophobic at times, and introduces a huge open world landscape that really does change the way you play Warframe. Because no longer are you using your weapons that are good for close range all the time, because now you can actually use a sniper. Now there's actually moments where you're trying to find where you're getting shot at and you realize that it's somebody half a mile away sniping you from up in a tower. Your acrobatic abilities aren't just for crashing into walls and trying to get around quick. You're actually using them to slide through this environment. You're sliding down slopes and sprinting, and the amount of freedom that it gives you to move around and how well the movement system in the game works with this type of environment, it's so impressive. And more than anything, what I think the Plains of Eidolon expansion showed is that in a year where we really did suffer from games trying to monopolize on loot boxes, and whales is the name for people who will spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on a single game, as much as we saw sort of an exploitation of players, Plains of Eidolon really showed how a free-to-play game can provide an incredible amount of content to players in a very fair way. Plains of Eidolon, and Warframe in general, it is very grindy, and sometimes it'll feel like your progress is very, very slow, but nothing that you need to spend money on isn't something that you can't get just by playing. Now there's a lot of cosmetics and stuff, but also it's a free game, and you got this expansion for free. And it's an expansion that doesn't require you to have played hundreds of hours of Warframe before. I think you only need to get through a few number of main story missions, which you kind of get right a lot in the beginning, and then you can just go straight to Eidolon. And it was just so generous and so well put together, and Warframe absolutely showed how a game can be a service, but it doesn't have to be a bad service. It can be an excellent, excellent service that you want to spend a few dollars here and there on, because they're providing you with so much solid content. Content that changes the whole game. You know, I mean, this expansion, it's a little bit hard for me personally to go back to the old mission structures where you're running through corridors when you've got this huge open area with bounties and missions and bosses that come out at night. I mean, it's just so impressive. And to top it all off, you know, the gameplay for Warframe has been getting more and more solid as time goes on. They keep just refining it just that little bit. The controls for the movement become more precise and sleek, and the shooting becomes more satisfying, and they're really, really honing in that perfect gameplay loop. And Plains of Eidolon was just the next great step forward for it. And from what I've seen, I don't know if it's been confirmed, but from what I've seen and heard, it sounds as though there are going to be more open environments like this in the future. Now, I hope that the whole game doesn't become that, because I know there's a lot of people who really enjoy the dungeon structure of Warframe in the past. So I'm hoping that we'll get kind of a happy medium where every few years maybe we get just a giant open world land to add to the places we can go to. Warframe is impressive because I think in this year more than any other, it's really shown an expansion of itself. With the Plains of Eidolon, we got to actually see a civilization going on in the Plains of Eidolon. There was a town and there was people, and it felt almost like a Western RPG when you were in that town, and then you headed out into the area to do missions. In a way, it was a weird mix between a sci-fi shooter and a Western RPG and a little bit of Monster Hunter. It really is becoming a blend of all these different genres, and I think Warframe is so much better for it.
Here we go, off the rails. Don't you know it's time to raise our sails? It's freedom like you never knew. 20 bags or a pass. Say the word, I'll be there in a flash. You could say my hat is off to you.
Super Mario Odyssey. I mean, what is there really to say about this game that hasn't been said 100 times over already? It is one of the most precise, well-polished, well-designed 3D platformers that we have gotten in probably over a decade. The graphics for it are absolutely perfect, which is something I did not expect myself to say. So let me put this out there right now. When I saw the original announcement for Super Mario Odyssey, I was not a big fan. I thought the idea of putting Mario into something like an open world-ish kind of New York City, which is what they kept demonstrating, it just looked so weird. And then they showed him out in a desert with all this kind of Day of the Dead type art. It was very strange. And yet, after playing it, I couldn't imagine it being any other way. Because once you actually start playing it and you start going through these areas one at a time, they all kind of fit together in their own disassociative way. They fit together because none of them fit together. And I guess that is a bit of an oxymoron, but in this case it just works. Because each level is so well designed and there's so much fun just to run around, I find myself spending way more time playing this game and enjoying it than I think I would have if there was just one consistent art style. See, because if I'm playing it and I spend 3 or 4 hours in New Donk City, for example, which is the real life looking city, I can just go to another location and it feels like I'm playing the same game but with a completely different tone. And that kind of keeps the whole game feeling fresh for an incredibly long time. And again, like I mentioned, they're just all so well designed, all these levels, and they fit together so well, and there's so much to explore. And it's also the first Mario game with endgame, which I didn't think that I would ever say, but almost in the way how when you reach max level in an MMO, you would say, okay, now the real game opens up, right? Now you're doing the high level content and you're getting into the nitty gritty. The same kind of applies with Mario Odyssey, which is weird. You go through the main story and you collect a fraction of the moons that the game has to offer, and then it feels like the rest of the game opens up and it becomes more of a sandbox than it already was. Because unlike when you're going through the main story and it guides you through the different levels, you have these multitude of worlds to go to, and your objective is find 200 more moons. And it's like, okay, well, I can do that in New Donk City, or I can do it in the desert area, or I can do it in all these different kingdoms, and it's just, it feels really great to be able to have that freedom in a Mario game, of all things. So it's a bizarre game, but it's honestly one of the best platforming games that I have ever played. And I say that with all of the best intentions behind it, because originally my favorite platformer of all time was Banjo-Kazooie, and then Banjo-Tooie after that, though I think they went a little overboard with the level design in that game. But Mario Odyssey, I can definitively say I enjoy more than Banjo-Kazooie. And that's weird that I'm comparing this game to Banjo-Kazooie and not to previous Mario games. And that's because it really does kind of buck the trend of a lot of those previous Mario games. Even Super Mario 64. I keep seeing people compare this to Mario 64, and I'm not quite sure why. I guess because you're going to different worlds all with a different kind of tone, but really the way the game does not kick you out of the world when you get a star, or moon in this case, really is one of the biggest changes. A lot of the game itself really is what you would expect from a Mario game, jumping, running, all that stuff. But being able to capture creatures is very reminiscent of Banjo-Kazooie, and it wears its inspiration on its sleeve in many ways, and it always maintains this really light-hearted tone, and I'm really, really in love with this game. It's exceeded all my expectations, and honestly, it's absolutely one of the best games for the Nintendo Switch. And there was a little bit of concern going around with people saying that, there's a lot of times, well, maybe not a lot of times, people were a little upset because there are some instances where you need to use the motion controls to get certain moons. Now, I've collected quite a few moons, definitely not anywhere near all of the moons, so I cannot speak for those moons that I have not collected. But I have yet to come into a situation where you can't supplement lack of motion controls with some tricky jumping and platforming. And that's what's so cool, is that the game presents you with an objective. It will say that you are here and the moon is over there that you want. And there will be some sort of path to get there, but what's so amazing about this game is that because they give you such a huge amount of freedom, the amount of different jumps you can do, jumping on your hat, wall jumping, rolling around, I mean, you can really just kind of run around all over the place. There's so many different ways to approach an objective, and I don't think any two players will really approach a whole world the same way, where I might see a path in one direction, you might see a path in another, and we get a slightly different experience. And that's what makes the game so amazing, is it's so fun to just look online and see somebody else play the game and see what kind of moves and techniques they use to get around the worlds that you might have not ever considered. And that's hugely important, because player agency like that, where the player is the one who decides how they get around the world, that's something that a lot of games forget. And they try and make a too scripted experience, and they want you to solve this particular platforming challenge. In Mario Odyssey, that challenge is there, but if you can find a better way around it, there's nothing stopping you from doing that except your own ability and the limitations of the character. So, it's really impressive, and I was just completely blown away by this game this year, and I'm honestly just looking forward to putting more hours into it and getting more moons. So, here we are. My favorite game of 2017. This is a game that I think will not surprise anybody. And I don't think that it's going to be a game that will be missing from many people's #1 game of the year. The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. Yeah, another Switch game. I know, I am a very hardcore PC gamer, and yet the Nintendo Switch with these two games, Super Mario Odyssey and Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, they completely destroyed it this year in terms of quality games. And I think I'm just going to say this right out of the gate. The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild is not only my favorite game of 2017, it is without a doubt one of my favorite games of all time. It has completely changed the formula for Zelda. See, Super Mario Odyssey, what was so great about it is that it took the formula of Mario, but it kind of expanded it and did some more things with it, and kind of it loosened itself up a little bit to allow the player to do more things. The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild took the formula of a traditional Zelda game, crumpled it up and threw it in the trash, and then made something completely different inspired by it. And I think that's such an incredible idea, and I'm so happy that they did it. See, I love Zelda games, I really do, but they always felt to me a little bit constrained by these mechanics that have been used for so many years. You know, the Z targeting was always there, and there was always different dungeons, and there was a light dungeon, dark dungeon, fire dungeon, water dungeon, and it was very repetitive after a while, despite being some of the most well-made games on the market. But what The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild did was that they took the spirit of Zelda. You know, those games always inspired a sense of adventure and discovery, and just, they get you wanting to get out of the couch and just run out into the wild and just go crazy. Now, of course, you can't because it's dangerous and I don't recommend it, but Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild does get very close to giving you that same experience. It's such a well-made game, and there are some problems that I have with it. You know, I think the frame rate, I'd love to see them do maybe a remaster in a few years or something to help polish that up a little bit, get the frame rate smoothened out. But the world was just so fascinating to explore, and there were so many reasons why it was. And the one that I didn't see too many people talking about, and maybe it's because it's not as big a deal to them as it is to me, but the way the world map actually was created was designed to get you out there discovering things. See, in a normal open world game, be it Skyrim or Grand Theft Auto or Assassin's Creed, these open world games, you open up your map and you have icons everywhere. Locations to visit, little secrets to find, people to talk to, quest objectives, all these things. But what Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild did was they gave you this full map, and they put a few markers around, you know, if there's a stable or a city. But then what they did was that they gave you this ability to mark it up with stamps and waypoints, and these things are awesome. See, the waypoints you can put down, and they will show up when you're looking through the binoculars, so you can track where you want to go with the big glowing waypoint tower. And you then can see it on the map as well. But then the stamps are such a great idea, because say you find a location and you kind of want to remember it, or you just want to mark down that you've been there. So you open up your map, you look at the stamps, and you identify it with something like a skull, and now you know, oh, okay, there's some dangerous enemies there, or there's a really good weapon in a chest, but you don't need it right now, so you mark it down with a sword icon. And by the time you've put in 100 hours into this game, you have a world map that you created. You are your own cartographer of this map, and it goes such a long way towards making you feel like you're out there on an adventure by yourself and exploring. True exploration. I played the game for so many hours and then found another stable out in the middle of like the north wherever in the map. I didn't know that was there. The game never told me. It's just quietly out there on its own. And things like that are awesome. There's always something new to find. The Koroks are slightly annoying, but it's still cool to be gliding down from a cliff and you see something that kind of looks out of the ordinary. And so you go over to it, you explore around a little bit, and oh, there you go, you got a Korok seed. And now you can use it after a while to upgrade your inventory. You know, I mean, there's just so many little things that keep you exploring, and that was definitely the whole crux of the game. Everything revolved around you exploring. One of the main quests that you get that kind of permeates throughout the whole game is you trying to reclaim these lost memories by looking at a picture. But they don't tell you where this is, it's just a picture that you can see a little bit of the environment, and then you have the entire map to try and figure out where this is. And yet, despite it sounding daunting and almost impossible to do, there's also little things throughout the world that help you find this. So first of all, it's always a location that you can kind of, in the back of your mind, think, okay, I kind of remember seeing that before, where was it? Or you can talk to certain characters, and you know, there's a painter who you'll find and he'll kind of guide you around a little bit, and just other characters will give you some directions if you need it, just a little bit, just enough to make it still feel like you're exploring. The game never took that sense away from you. And then in terms of the story for the game, it was about on par with the other Zelda games, but because you, the player, felt more important, not that Link as a character has never not been important, but because the game has such a big emphasis on exploring at your own pace and in your own way, you feel more of a connection with Link, the character. So when the story's going on, it feels more epic because you feel more involved in everything. And Then they have all the shrines around, and I love those shrines because a big part of the Zelda series has always been puzzles. And so what's great about the shrines is that it condenses the puzzle aspect into one mechanic. So you'll go into a shrine and you'll have a very simple, very quick, easy to understand puzzle right in the beginning of it to explain what the mechanic is of that dungeon, and then it just keeps getting more challenging as you get further into the shrine, and they're really quick. Most shrines that aren't excessively challenging will take around 15 minutes, if that. But that's so great because it prevents someone like me, who's terrible at puzzles, it prevents someone like me from getting frustrated because I never feel like the puzzle is something that's going to take a huge chunk of time out of the game. It's something that you can go into, challenge your mind a little bit, and then you're done. And then you can go back out into the world and explore. And that makes those so fun to go through, and I never found myself wanting to skip them because they're so quick, they're so fun, you get a great reward at the end, and it now acts as a way to teleport around. And that's another thing about the map, I guess kind of counts like the map, but another reason why the game feels so great about exploring. You don't just travel to a town, you don't just travel to wherever you want, you have to find these shrines in order to be able to travel there. So if you find a location up in the mountainous region where you're dying of frost, it becomes a very life-threatening search to find the closest shrine you can so that you can then teleport back and forth from there now. Otherwise, you have to walk all the way back. And in terms of walking and having to find your way back to a location, it would be very remiss if I did not talk about the traversal system in the game. It is just so fun to be able to climb on absolutely everything. And it's something that I could not imagine being not in an open world game like this anymore. Being able to just climb straight up a cliff or climb up a pole just by walking up to it and climbing up, that really opens up the game, and it feels like the most freedom that I as a player have ever had in an open world game. See, something like The Witcher or Skyrim or what have you, that'll be an open world and you'll have choices and you can do things within that world, but you're still generally stuck on the ground. And with Breath of the Wild, you have freedom in another way. You don't have freedom to change the story or interact with characters or anything, but you have freedom to climb up a mountain that maybe you aren't supposed to, maybe there's nothing really up there, and then you just jump off and use your glider to go wherever you want. And chances are, wherever you land, there will be something there worth exploring. And that's just something that I don't know if any other game will get that same sense of adventure. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, and that is it for my top 4 games of 2017. I do hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. I know that not all of these games are things that, technically released this year, especially numbers 4 and 3. But, yeah, these are just the games that I played this year and that I had the most fun with. So I counted the ones with big expansions, as I mentioned before the whole video. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and hey, leave a comment down below. Let me know what your favorite games of the year were. Let me know if there's anything that I really, really need to play this year, because, like I said, I did not play many games that released in 2017, so if you have recommendations that you think I might enjoy, definitely let me know. Thank you again so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.